Maya Rodriguez stood in front of the mirror inside the service elevator and checked how she looked. She wore a black vest and white shirt, the uniform for catering staff at expensive parties. She was 28 years old, and this was her third job of the week. Money was always tight. Her apartment in the lower districts of New Houston was small, and the rent kept going up. It was the year 2347, and humanity had spread across 12 star systems. But some things never changed. Rich people lived in tall towers that touched the clouds, and people like Maya served them their food and drinks. The elevator doors opened with a soft sound. Maya stepped out into the penthouse that belonged to Harrison Chen. She had heard that name before. Everyone had. Chen Industries made the quantum drive systems that allowed ships to travel between stars. The man owned more money than some entire planets. His penthouse took up the entire top floor of the building, 200 floors above the city streets. The party was already busy when Maya arrived. She saw diplomats from the outer colonies talking with corporate executives. Military officers in their dress uniforms stood near the windows, holding glasses of expensive wine. Maya picked up her tray and started moving through the crowd. She had learned long ago how to be invisible at these events. Rich people rarely looked at the staff. To them, waiters and waitresses were just part of the furniture, there to serve but not to be noticed. Maya offered champagne to guests and carried trays of small fancy foods. She smiled politely when people took items from her tray, but they never smiled back. They never even looked at her face. She was just the person holding the food. After 2 hours of walking around, her feet hurt and her face hurt from fake smiling. She decided to take a quick break near the hallway that led to the private rooms. That was when she saw it. Through an open door, Maya could see into a study. The room had dark wood furniture and shelves full of books. But what caught her eye was a photograph on the wall. She stepped closer, her heart starting to beat faster. The tray in her hand shook slightly. She set it down on a nearby table and moved toward the door. The photograph showed a little girl about 5 years old. The girl wore a yellow dress and stood in front of a building. Maya knew that photograph. She knew it because she had the exact same one in a shoebox under her bed. The little girl in the yellow dress was her. But how did Harrison Chen have her childhood photo hanging on his wall? Maya felt dizzy. She gripped the doorframe to steady herself. Her mother had given her that photograph years ago before she died. It was one of the only pictures Maya had from her early childhood. She had spent hours looking at it, trying to remember that day, trying to remember anything from before she turned 6. But her early memories were fuzzy, like trying to see through fog. She looked around quickly to make sure no one was watching, then stepped into the study. She moved closer to the photograph. It was not just similar, it was identical. The same yellow dress with small white flowers, the same uncertain smile on her young face, the same building in the background that she had never been able to identify. But there was something different about this version of the photo, something she had not noticed in her own copy. In the corner of this photograph, there was more of the image showing. Her own copy had been cut or cropped, but this one showed more of the scene. Maya could see part of a man standing next to her younger self. Only his arm and part of his body were visible. But she could see he wore a uniform, and she recognized the insignia on that uniform. After working so many military functions, she had learned to identify the different branches and divisions. It was an Interstellar Defense Corps uniform. Special Operations Division, the most secretive branch of the military. What was she doing as a 5-year-old child standing next to someone from Special Operations? And why did Harrison Chen, one of the richest men in human space, have this photograph? Maya heard voices coming from the hallway. She quickly backed out of the study and picked up her tray again. Her hands were shaking. A group of guests walked past laughing about something. They did not notice her standing there, or the fact that her face had gone pale. She forced herself to keep moving, to keep doing her job, but her mind was racing. Her mother, Carmen Rodriguez, had never talked about Maya's father. Whenever young Maya had asked, her mother would get quiet and sad. Sometimes she would cry. Eventually, Maya stopped asking. Her mother had died 3 years ago from genetic degradation syndrome, a disease that killed many poor people who could not afford proper medical treatment. Carmen had taken her secrets to the grave. Maya barely remembered the rest of the party. She moved through the rooms like a robot, offering drinks and food, clearing empty glasses. Her mind kept going back to that photograph. When the party finally ended around midnight, she collected her pay and left the building. On the train ride back to her apartment, she stared out the window at the city lights but did not really see them. Her apartment was in Sector 7, one of the older parts of New Houston. The buildings here were shorter and more crowded. The streets were not as clean. Maya climbed the stairs to her fourth-floor apartment because the elevator was broken again. Inside, she went straight to her bedroom and pulled out the shoebox from under her bed. The box contained everything she had left from her mother. A few pieces of cheap jewelry, some old data cards with photos and videos, and the photograph of young Maya in her yellow dress. She held it under the light and studied it carefully. Yes, it had been cropped. The edges were rough where someone had cut the image. What else had been removed? Who was the man in the uniform? And most importantly, why? Maya sat on her bed and pulled out her data pad. She started searching for information about Harrison Chen. The official record said he was a self-made genius who had revolutionized space travel. He had started his company 30 years ago and grown it into one of the largest corporations in human space. But as Maya dug deeper, she found gaps in his history. There were several years where his location was listed as classified government work. The gap that interested Maya most was from 2314 to 2319. 5 years where Harrison Chen seemed to disappear from public records. All it said was classified government research. Maya checked her own birthday. She had been born in 2319. The same year Chen's classified work ended. That could not be a coincidence. She searched for hours, following one link to another, going down rabbit holes of information. Most of it led nowhere. Files were sealed or deleted. But she found one small reference in an old academic journal. It was talking about quantum research and mentioned something called Project Lighthouse. The name was mostly blacked out in the document, but a few words were visible. Experimental research, human subjects, neural enhancement. The project had apparently been shut down in 2319 after what the document called an unfortunate incident. Maya felt cold. 2319 again. The year she was born. The year her mother had appeared in New Houston with a newborn baby and no past that anyone could trace. Carmen had always said she came from Earth, but she never said where exactly. She never talked about family or friends. It was like her life had started the day Maya was born. By the time the sun started to rise, Maya had made a decision. She needed answers. She needed to know why her photograph was on Harrison Chen's wall. She needed to know what Project Lighthouse was. And she needed to know what had happened to her mother in 2319 that had made her run and hide for the rest of her life. Maya looked at the little girl in the yellow dress one more time. That child had no idea what was coming. No idea that 23 years later, she would be a waitress barely surviving in the lower districts. No idea that her whole life was built on secrets and lies. But Maya was going to find the truth. Whatever it took, whatever it cost, she deserved to know who she really was. The next morning, Maya called the catering company where she worked. She told them she was available for any events at the Chen estate. The woman on the phone sounded surprised. Most workers tried to avoid going back to the same wealthy homes because the rich people were often demanding and rude. But Maya insisted. She needed another chance to see that photograph, to maybe find more answers. It took 3 weeks before another opportunity came. The catering company called and said Harrison Chen was hosting a small dinner party for investors from the outer colonies. They needed staff for the evening. Maya immediately said yes. This time she came prepared. She had bought a tiny camera that looked like a button on her vest. She had also studied the layout of the penthouse from building records she found online. The dinner party started at 7 in the evening. There were only about 20 guests this time, much smaller than the last event. Maya and 3 other servers moved between the dining room and the kitchen, bringing out courses of expensive food. The guests talked about investments and profit margins and expansion into new star systems. Maya smiled and nodded when necessary, but her attention was on the hallway that led to the study. Around 10 o'clock, most of the guests moved to the observation deck. They wanted to see the city lights from 200 floors up. This was Maya's chance. She waited until the other servers were busy cleaning up the dining room. Then she slipped away down the hallway. Her heart pounded in her chest. If she got caught, she would lose her job. Maybe worse. But she had to know. The study door was closed this time, but not locked. Maya pushed it open slowly, listening for any sound. The room was dark except for the glow of city lights coming through the windows. She found the photograph on the wall where she had seen it before. She activated her button camera and started recording. But as her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she noticed something she had not seen during the party. There was a panel next to the photograph and it was slightly open. Maya reached out and slid the panel all the way open. Behind it was a hidden section of wall covered with more photographs. Dozens of them. Her breath caught in her throat. These were not just pictures of her. These were pictures of many different children, all around 5 or 6 years old. Each child wore a numbered tag pinned to their shirt. And there in the third row was young Maya, number 47. The children in the photographs all stood in the same place, in front of what looked like a medical facility. Maya could see people in the background wearing military uniforms and white lab coats. The children all had the same uncertain expression on their faces, like they did not quite understand what was happening but knew it was important. There were more photographs below the first set. These showed some of the same children at different ages. Maya saw herself at age 7, age 9, age 11, but she did not remember these photos being taken. She saw other children too, growing up in what looked like normal families. Some photos showed children alone. Each photograph had a date stamp and long strings of numbers and letters that Maya could not understand. But one thing was clear. This was not just about her. This was about dozens of children, maybe more. Maya was so focused on the photographs that she did not hear the footsteps behind her until it was too late. The lights in the study suddenly blazed on, bright and harsh. She spun around, her heart jumping into her throat. Harrison Chen stood in the doorway. He looked older than his public photographs, probably in his 70s. His hair was silver and his face had deep lines, but his eyes were sharp and alert. He looked at Maya for a long moment and she waited for him to call security, to have her arrested for breaking into his private study. Instead, he said quietly, "Maya, I have been waiting for one of you to find your way back." She stared at him in shock. He knew her name. How did he know her name? Chen walked slowly into the room and gestured to a chair near the desk. "Please sit," he said. "You deserve to know the truth. All of you did, but the government decided otherwise." Maya's legs felt weak. She sat down without taking her eyes off him. Chen moved to the window and stood there for a moment, looking out at the city far below. Then he started talking. His voice was tired, like he had been carrying a heavy weight for a very long time. Project Lighthouse began in 2314, Chen said. Humanity had just made first contact with the Kepler entities. They were beings made of pure energy who existed in quantum states. They were not hostile, but they were impossible for us to understand. We needed a way to communicate with them, to build a bridge between matter-based consciousness and quantum consciousness. He turned to look at Maya. I was the lead scientist on the project. We developed a process to change human genetics at a fundamental level. We could create children whose brains could interface with quantum fields. We recruited volunteers, mostly couples who could not have children naturally. We offered them hope. We told them they would be helping humanity take the next step in evolution. Maya felt cold spreading through her body. We were experiments, she said. Her voice came out flat and dead. You were hope, Chen said firmly, and you were loved. Every family that participated knew the risks. They wanted to help. Your mother, Carmen Rodriguez, she was one of our research assistants. She was brilliant and kind. She believed in the project completely. When we needed one final test subject before we expanded the program, she volunteered to carry the child herself. Maya's world tilted sideways. My mother was part of this. She volunteered to carry you, Chen repeated. He came closer and sat in the chair across from Maya. Your father was not one person. We used genetic material from multiple donors, optimized for quantum sensitivity. You have no single father, Maya. But Carmen loved you more than anything in this world. When the government shut down the project, when they decided the risk was too great and ordered all the children terminated, your mother took you and ran. The word terminated hung in the air between them. Maya felt sick. Terminated. They wanted to kill children. Kill her. Chen nodded, seeing the understanding on her face. I helped her escape, Chen said softly. I helped all the families I could. I gave them new identities, money, places to hide. But I could not save everyone. Of the 63 children in Project Lighthouse, only 18 survived the purge. Maya felt tears running down her face. She did not wipe them away. Why keep the photographs? Why risk it? Because you deserve to be remembered, Chen whispered. Because what they did was wrong. I could not let them just erase you all from history. These photographs are my shame and my hope. Shame for what we did to you. Hope that maybe someday you would come back. Maya sat in silence for a long time. She thought about her mother, working low-paid jobs, always looking over her shoulder, dying young from a disease that could have been cured if she had not been hiding. Carmen had given up everything to protect her daughter, and Maya had never known, had never understood the sacrifice. Finally, she looked up at Chen. "What am I?" she asked. "What did you make us?" Chen's expression was sad. "That," he said, "is a longer story. And before I tell you, you need to understand something. The Kepler entities have returned. And this time, they are not alone. Humanity needs you, Maya. All 18 of you. We need you now more than ever." Chen walked to his desk and activated a holographic display. Information started flowing through the air in front of Maya, streams of data and images that made her head hurt to look at. 3 days ago, Chen explained, our deep space monitoring stations detected something entering the outer solar system. A fleet of ships, but not like anything we have ever seen. They exist partially in quantum states. Our sensors can barely detect them. The display showed recordings from the monitoring stations. Maya could see shapes that seemed to shift and change. Never quite solid, never quite there. They hurt to look at, like trying to see something that was not meant for human eyes. Chen continued talking, his voice grim. The entities are trying to communicate. They are sending signals, patterns of quantum information. Our best computers cannot decipher them. Our most advanced artificial intelligences cannot make sense of them. The military has mobilized everything we have, but we are completely blind. We do not know if they are peaceful or hostile. We do not know what they want. We are essentially children trying to understand adults speaking a language we have never heard. Maya stared at the shifting patterns on the display. Something about them felt familiar, though she could not explain why. It was like hearing a song she had forgotten, or seeing a color that had no name. Her eyes tracked the flows automatically, finding rhythms and structures she could not consciously identify. "I can see patterns," she said slowly. "Not all of it, but pieces. There are things that repeat, like words in a sentence." Chen's face lit up with hope and something that might have been relief. "That is exactly what we need. You were designed for this, Maya. Your neural pathways can process quantum information the same way normal brains process light or sound. You can perceive things that are invisible to the rest of us." "But I am just a waitress," Maya protested. "I have never done anything special. I have never even felt different because you were never trained," Chen said. "Because your abilities were meant to be developed gradually, with proper guidance and support. Your mother kept you safe by keeping you ignorant. She never let you know what you were capable of. It was the only way to protect you from the government agents who were hunting for survivors." He pulled up more files on the display. "We have found 9 other survivors so far. Most of them are like you, living normal lives, unaware of their abilities. But we need to find them all. We need to bring you together. Individually, you can perceive quantum states. But together, working as a network, you might be able to actually communicate with the entities." Maya felt overwhelmed. This was too much, too fast. 2 hours ago, she had been serving dinner to rich people. Now she was being told she was some kind of quantum-enhanced human, who might be the only hope for preventing an interstellar incident. It was insane. But as she looked at the data flowing on the display, as she felt her mind naturally finding patterns in the chaos, she knew it was also true. "What if I say no?" she asked. "What if I just want to go back to my normal life?" Chen looked at her with understanding. "Then I give you money, a new identity, and help you disappear. I will not force you, Maya. You have already been used enough. The choice is yours. But I hope you will consider what your mother would want. She gave everything to keep you alive. Maybe it is time to find out why you were worth saving." Maya thought about Carmen Rodriguez, working herself to death in low-paying jobs, never complaining, always making sure Maya had enough to eat even when she went hungry herself. Her mother had been protecting a secret all those years, carrying the weight of Project Lighthouse alone. And now that weight was passing to Maya. She looked at the photographs on the wall, at the other children who had not survived. 45 of them, terminated by their own government because someone decided they were too dangerous to live. They never got a choice. They never got a chance to decide what their lives meant. "But Maya did. I will help," she said. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Tell me what I need to do." Relief flooded Chen's face. He looked 10 years younger for a moment. "First we find the others. I have a ship ready, a crew that can be trusted. You will need to go to them, bring them back. Most of them do not know what they are. You will have to convince them." Over the next hour, Chen showed Maya everything he knew about the other survivors. Daniel Park, working as a mining engineer on Mars, known for his uncanny ability to sense structural weaknesses in rock. Lisa Grant, a data analyst on Europa Station, famous for spotting patterns that computers missed. Kyle Bennett, a pilot with an almost supernatural talent for navigation. Nina Torres, a doctor whose intuition about illnesses was legendary among her patients. Alex Kane, a programmer who wrote code that should not work but somehow did. Each of them had shown signs of their abilities without understanding what those signs meant. Each of them had felt different their whole lives, out of place, like they did not quite fit in the normal world. Because they were not meant for the normal world. They were meant for something bigger. Maya studied the files until her eyes hurt. She memorized names and faces and locations. These people were strangers to her, but they were also family in a way she had never had family before. They shared something deeper than blood. They shared a purpose that had been stolen from them before they were old enough to understand it. "When do I leave?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning," Chen said. "The ship is ready and waiting. I will have someone pick you up from your apartment. Pack light. You will be traveling fast," Maya nodded. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Why are you doing this? You could have stayed hidden. You are rich enough to survive whatever happens. Why risk everything to help us?" Chen was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with old guilt. "Because I helped create you. Because I watched 45 children die and did nothing to stop it. Because I have spent 30 years trying to make up for my cowardice. Because, despite everything, I still believe that Project Lighthouse was worth it. Not the way we did it, not the lies and secrets, but the idea itself. The belief that humanity could evolve, could become more while still remaining human. That is worth fighting for." Maya understood. It was not about redemption or forgiveness. It was about finishing what should have been finished decades ago. It was about giving the survivors of Project Lighthouse the chance to prove that they were not mistakes or failures. They were the next step. And maybe, just maybe, they were exactly what humanity needed right now. She left the penthouse and rode the elevator down 200 floors. The city spread out below her, millions of lights representing millions of people who had no idea that everything might be about to change. Maya wondered if they would thank her for what she was about to do, or if they would hate her for it. Probably both, but it did not matter. The choice was made. Tomorrow she would begin the search for her brothers and sisters, the other survivors of Project Lighthouse. Together they would face the quantum entities and try to bridge the gap between human consciousness and something far beyond human understanding. It was terrifying and impossible and absolutely necessary, and for the first time in her life, Maya Rodriguez felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The ship that Chen provided was nothing like the commercial transports Maya had seen at the spaceports. It was sleek and fast, designed for rapid travel between colonies. The crew consisted of 3 people who asked no questions and treated Maya with quiet respect. Within hours of leaving Earth, they were already approaching Mars. Maya spent the travel time studying everything Chen had given her about the other survivors. Daniel Park was 27 years old and had been working in the Mars mining colonies for 6 years. His personnel files showed an extraordinary safety record. He seemed to know when tunnels were unstable before any equipment could detect problems. Other miners thought he was just very experienced, but the numbers told a different story. Daniel had never lost anyone on his crew, never had a major accident, never failed to find rich mineral deposits. He was too good to be just experienced. Mars Colony Alpha was built inside an old impact crater, protected from the harsh surface conditions. Maya found Daniel in a bar near the mining district, sitting alone at a table drinking something that looked like beer but probably was not. He was a big man with broad shoulders and tired eyes. His hands were scarred and calloused from years of hard work. Maya sat down across from him without asking permission. He looked up, surprised, and she saw wariness in his face. Before he could speak, she placed a photograph on the table between them. It showed a young boy, maybe 6 years old, wearing a numbered tag. "Number 23. Daniel stared at the photo and all color drained from his face. "Where did you get this?" he asked. His voice was rough, like he had not used it much today. "From Harrison Chen," Maya said. "He kept records of all of us. All the children from Project Lighthouse." Daniel looked at her then. Really looked at her, and she saw recognition dawning. "You are one of us," he said. It was not a question. Number 47, Maya confirmed. She spent the next hour telling him everything. About finding her photograph, about confronting Chen, about Project Lighthouse and the Kepler entities and the quantum fleet that was currently sitting in the outer solar system. Daniel listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with every word. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "I always knew something was wrong with me. Not wrong exactly, different. I can feel the structure of things, the way rock and metal fit together. I can sense weaknesses, stress points, places where things will break. I thought maybe I was just very observant. But it is more than that, is it not?" Maya nodded. "We can perceive quantum states, the fundamental structure of matter itself. That is why you can sense things others cannot. Your brain processes information that normal humans cannot even detect." Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My whole life I felt like a freak. Now you are telling me I am literally not normal, not human in the usual sense. And you want me to help communicate with alien entities made of quantum energy. That is what you are asking." "Yes," Maya said simply. "I know it is insane, but we are the only chance humanity has. Chen thinks that together we can bridge the gap. Alone we are just different. Together we might be able to actually understand them." Daniel was quiet again. Then he finished his drink and stood up. "When do we leave?" "Just like that?" Maya asked, surprised. "Just like that," Daniel confirmed. "I have spent my whole life working in mines, breaking rock, going home tired. If there is a reason why I am different, a purpose for these abilities, then I want to know what it is. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "someone needs to make sure you do not get in over your head." Their next stop was Europa Station, one of the research facilities orbiting Jupiter's moon. Lisa Grant worked in the data analysis department of a terraforming corporation. She was 29 years old with sharp features and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Maya found her in the station's observation lounge, staring out at the ice-covered moon below. Lisa barely glanced at Maya when she approached, but she said, "I have been expecting someone like you for years now. I knew eventually my past would catch up with me." Maya sat down next to her, confused. "How did you know?" "Because I can see patterns in everything," Lisa said. "Data flows, probability streams, causal chains. I have been tracking anomalies related to Project Lighthouse for 5 years. I knew the program existed even though almost all records were deleted. I knew there were survivors, and I knew that eventually something would happen that would bring us together. The quantum signatures appearing in the outer system 3 days ago confirmed my projections." She turned to look at Maya for the first time. Her eyes were intense, almost uncomfortable to meet. "You are number 47. Maya Rodriguez. Your mother was Carmen Rodriguez, research assistant on Project Lighthouse. She died 3 years ago from genetic degradation syndrome. You have been working as catering staff in New Houston. 2 days ago you encountered Harrison Chen and he told you the truth. Am I correct?" Maya felt cold. "How do you know all that?" "I told you I see patterns. Information leaves traces even when people try to hide it. Your mother's death created anomalies in medical records. Your employment history created patterns in social security databases. Chen's activities created ripples in financial networks. I have been watching all of it, waiting to see what would happen. And now here you are, exactly as predicted. Then you know why I am here," Maya said. Lisa nodded. "You are gathering the survivors. You need us to work together to communicate with the quantum entities. The probability of success is difficult to calculate because we have no baseline data for this kind of interaction. But the probability of humanity surviving without attempting communication is essentially 0. So yes, I will help, not because I trust Chen or the government or anyone else, but because the mathematics say it is necessary." Over the next 2 weeks, Maya traveled across human space, finding one survivor after another. Kyle Bennett, the pilot, joined immediately after seeing his photograph. He said he had always felt like he could see the fabric of space, the curves and folds that ships traveled through. Nina Torres, the doctor, cried when Maya explained what she was. She had always known she could sense things about her patients that tests could not show, and she had spent her whole life thinking she was either crazy or blessed. Now she knew she was neither. Alex Kane, the programmer, laughed until he cried when Maya found him. Finally, he said. Finally, it makes sense. I write code that should not work. Programs that violate basic logic and somehow they run perfectly. Because I am not writing for normal computers. I am writing for quantum systems without realizing it. One by one, they joined. Each brought their unique abilities, their different ways of perceiving the quantum layer of reality. By the time Maya returned to Earth, she had found 12 of the 18 survivors. The other 6 were either impossible to locate or, in 2 heartbreaking cases, had already died. Their enhancements had eventually caused problems their bodies could not handle. Chen had been right. Without training, without proper medical support, their abilities were as much curse as gift. Chen was waiting when they arrived. He had prepared a facility in the desert, buried deep underground in what used to be part of the original Project Lighthouse complex. The military knew about it now. There was no more hiding. The quantum fleet had moved closer, now orbiting Jupiter itself. Humanity's warships surrounded them in a tense standoff. Both sides were waiting, watching, preparing for what came next. The 12 survivors of Project Lighthouse gathered in the facility, strangers who were also family, normal people who were also something more. They looked at each other with a mixture of fear and hope and recognition. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. That was what they had been made for. That was why they had survived when others had not. And now, finally, they would have the chance to find out if it had all been worth it. Through the collective consciousness, Maya shared her mother's story. Not just the facts, but the feeling of it. The weight of sacrifice that Carmen Rodriguez had carried every day. She showed the entities a woman who had given up her career, her identity, her health, everything she had to protect a child who had been created in a laboratory, who should not have existed according to the government that tried to terminate her. But Carmen had loved Maya anyway, loved her fiercely and completely because love was not about logic or genetics. It was about choice. Daniel shared his memories of the mines of working alongside other humans in dangerous conditions. He showed the camaraderie that developed between people who trusted each other with their lives. He showed how humans could be at their best when facing challenges together, when using their different strengths to overcome what no individual could manage alone. He showed that humanity's power came not from individuals but from cooperation, from the bonds between people who chose to help each other survive. Lisa shared her understanding of patterns and probability, but she also shared her frustration. She showed the entities how she had spent years seeing connections that others missed, understanding truths that no one would listen to, being dismissed as too strange or too intense. She showed the loneliness of being different, of seeing the world in ways that isolated her from others. But she also showed that she had never stopped trying, never given up on finding meaning in the patterns, never lost hope that someday her abilities would matter. Nina shared the feeling of healing, of using her intuition to help patients when science could not. She showed countless moments of diagnosis, of somehow knowing what tests would miss, of seeing the patterns of disease before they fully manifested. She showed the joy of saving lives and the grief of losing patients she could not help. She showed that being human meant caring about others, even strangers, even when it hurt. Even when every loss felt personal. Kyle shared the freedom of flight, of moving through space in ways that defied normal understanding. He showed his love of exploration, his hunger to see new worlds and discover new possibilities. He showed that humans were driven by curiosity, by the need to push boundaries and go beyond what was safe or known. That drive had caused problems, yes, but it had also led to incredible achievements, to art and science and discovery that enriched existence for everyone. Alex shared his relationship with code, with creating logical structures that somehow exceeded their programming. He showed the joy of creation, of building something new that had never existed before. He showed that humans were makers, builders, artists who could not help but try to shape the world around them. Sometimes they built weapons and sometimes they built wonders. But the impulse to create was fundamental to who they were. One by one, all 12 of them shared their experiences, their perspectives, their uniquely human ways of understanding existence. They showed the entities both the worst and the best of humanity. The violence and the compassion, the greed and the generosity, the fear and the courage. They did not try to hide the flaws or pretend humans were perfect. Instead, they showed the struggle, the constant effort to be better than they were, to overcome their limitations through will and cooperation and stubborn determination. The entities absorbed it all. Their vast consciousness processed human experience, comparing it to countless other species they had observed across billions of years. They saw the patterns, the trajectories, the probabilities, and slowly, gradually, their judgment began to form. The collective consciousness felt the entities reaching a decision, and Maya held her breath. Not literally because her body was far away, but in the quantum space where thought and being were the same thing. The entities showed them something then, a vision of two possible futures. In one, humanity remained locked in matter-based existence, limited to physical space and linear time. They would continue to spread across the galaxy, continue to make the same mistakes, eventually destroying themselves or being destroyed by forces they could not understand. It was the path of stagnation, of remaining forever children in a universe full of things they could not comprehend. In the other future, humanity evolved, not by abandoning what made them human, but by expanding it, by learning to exist partially in quantum states while maintaining their physical forms. They would become a bridge between matter and energy, between linear time and quantum superposition. They would be able to perceive and interact with layers of reality that were currently invisible, to communicate with beings like the entities, to take their place as one more form of consciousness in an infinitely diverse universe. But that evolution had a price. It required humanity to change, to accept guidance from the entities, to learn humility and patience and wisdom. It meant growing up as a species, accepting responsibility for their actions and their impact on the fabric of reality itself. Many humans would resist. Many would see it as a loss of independence, a surrender of human sovereignty. The path would be difficult and painful and full of conflict. The entities presented these two futures not as a choice they were imposing, but as possibilities they had observed. The quantum probability field showed both paths branching from this moment. Which one humanity took would depend on what happened next, on how they responded to this contact, on whether they could overcome their fear and pride to accept help from beings so fundamentally different from themselves. But the entities also showed something else, something that surprised the collective consciousness. They showed respect. The entities had watched humanity create Project Lighthouse, had seen them develop the technology to enhance their own children, to force evolution rather than waiting for it to occur naturally. That was presumptuous, arrogant, dangerous. It had caused suffering and death. It was very human in all the worst ways, but it was also proof that humans could adapt, could push beyond their limitations. The fact that 12 enhanced humans were now communicating in quantum space, bridging a gap that should have been impossible to cross, showed that humanity had potential. They were not wise yet, not mature, not ready to fully join the cosmic community, but they could be. With time and guidance and their own stubborn determination to survive and improve, they could become something remarkable. The collective consciousness understood what the entities were offering. Not domination or absorption or the loss of human identity. They were offering partnership, mentorship, a chance to learn from beings who had millions of years of experience navigating existence across multiple states of reality. They were offering humanity the same thing that Chen had tried to give the Project Lighthouse children. A chance to become more while remaining themselves. Maya felt the decision crystallizing in the collective mind. It was not just her decision or Chen's or even the 12 of them together. It was a decision that would affect all of humanity. Billions of people across dozens of worlds. They had no right to make that choice alone. But someone had to take the first step. Someone had to show humanity that this was possible, that evolution did not mean extinction, that becoming more did not mean becoming less. The collective reached out to the entities with a simple message. They showed acceptance, not surrender, but partnership. They showed willingness to learn, not weakness, but wisdom. They showed that humanity was ready to try, even if they failed, even if the path was hard, even if many would resist. 12 humans who had survived attempts to destroy them, who had found each other against impossible odds, who had learned to work as one consciousness while maintaining their individual selves. They showed the entities that humanity could change. And most importantly, they showed something that quantum beings who existed across all time simultaneously could not fully grasp. They showed hope, the uniquely human ability to believe in a better future, even when the present was dark, to keep trying even after repeated failures, to maintain faith that somehow things would work out. It was illogical, irrational, completely unjustified by probability calculations. It was also the most human thing in the universe. The entities received that message and considered it. Their vast consciousness processed the implications, calculated probabilities, assessed risks and opportunities, and then, after what felt like hours but was probably only seconds in linear time, they responded, not with words but with a shift in the quantum fields around Jupiter, around Earth, around the entire solar system. The military forces watching tensed, waiting for an attack that never came. Instead, the entities sent a signal that every human with even basic quantum detection equipment could understand. It was a simple message that translated roughly to agreement, partnership, beginning. The entities would stay. They would teach. They would help humanity take its first steps toward quantum consciousness, but the work would have to be done by humans themselves. Evolution could not be forced from outside. It had to come from within, from the choice to grow and change and become more than what they were. The collective consciousness celebrated, 12 minds experiencing joy as one. They had done it. Against all odds, despite all their flaws and fears, they had succeeded in bridging the gap. Humanity would survive, would grow, would have a chance to become something remarkable. The underground facility was larger than Maya had expected. It stretched deep into the desert rock, level after level of laboratories and living quarters and equipment rooms. Most of it was dark and abandoned, shut down when Project Lighthouse was terminated 30 years ago. But Chen had restored the main chamber, the heart of the complex where the original research had been conducted. The 12 survivors gathered there on their first night. They stood in a circle looking at each other, these strangers who shared something deeper than blood. Maya recognized the fear in their eyes because she felt it too. They had all spent their lives feeling different, out of place. Now they were being told their differences were exactly what humanity needed. The weight of that responsibility was almost crushing. Chen stood at the center of the circle next to a large piece of equipment. It looked like a sphere made of crystal and metal, about 3 meters across, humming with barely contained energy. "This is a quantum resonance array," Chen explained. "I have been working on it for 20 years, perfecting it, waiting for this moment. It will amplify and synchronize your natural abilities, allowing you to work as one unified consciousness." "What if it does not work?" asked Nina Torres. She was a small woman with kind eyes that had seen too much suffering. "What if we are not enough?" "Then humanity will have to find another way," Chen said honestly. "But I believe you are enough. You were designed for this purpose. Your neural pathways were enhanced specifically to interface with quantum consciousness. Together you represent humanity's best chance, perhaps its only chance, to bridge the gap between matter-based life and quantum existence." Lisa Grant stepped forward. She had been quiet since arriving, but now she spoke with certainty. "I have run the calculations. The probability patterns suggest that if we fail, the entities will conclude that humanity is not ready for contact. They will leave and they will ensure that we cannot follow them. They will cut us off from the quantum layer of reality, lock us into pure matter-based existence. We will never evolve beyond what we are now." "That does not sound so bad," said Kyle Bennett. He was younger than most of them, only 25, with the restless energy of someone who had never been comfortable staying in one place. "We managed fine before we knew about quantum consciousness, did we?" Lisa asked. "Look at our history. War, destruction, environmental collapse. We nearly destroyed Earth before we expanded into space. Now we are spreading those same problems to new worlds. The entities are offering us a chance to evolve, to become something better while remaining human. If we reject that chance, we will be trapped in our own limitations forever." The group fell silent. Maya understood what Lisa was saying. This was not just about preventing a war or establishing communication. This was about the entire future of humanity, about whether they would remain a young, violent species or become something more. And that decision somehow rested on 12 people who had spent most of their lives just trying to survive. "When do we start?" Maya asked. "Now," Chen said. "The entities are waiting. They have been patient, but their patience will not last forever. Every day we delay increases the risk that someone on one of those military ships will do something stupid, fire a weapon, provoke a response. We need to establish communication before that happens." The 12 of them took their positions around the quantum resonance array. Maya felt her heart pounding. This was it. Everything that had happened, her mother's sacrifice, Chen's guilt, the 45 who had died, it all led to this moment. She looked around the circle at the others and saw her own fear reflected in their faces. But she also saw determination. Chen activated the array. The crystal sphere began to glow with a soft blue light that seemed to pulse in time with Maya's heartbeat. She felt something reaching out from the device, touching her mind, gentle but insistent. For a moment she wanted to pull back to resist. Then she remembered her mother's face, remembered the photographs of the children who had not survived, and she let go. The sensation was unlike anything Maya had experienced. Her consciousness began to expand, spreading beyond the boundaries of her body. She could feel the others, their minds touching hers. Daniel's solid, steady presence, structured and strong. Lisa's cascading streams of data and probability. Nina's warm biological awareness, feeling every heartbeat in the room. Kyle's three-dimensional spatial sense, perceiving the shape of space itself. Alex's digital consciousness, thinking in patterns of code and logic. They were still individuals, still themselves, but also becoming something greater. Their thoughts began to synchronize, their perceptions overlapping. Maya could sense things she had never sensed before, could see layers of reality that had always been invisible, the quantum foam that underlay existence itself, the constant flux of particles appearing and disappearing, the probability waves that collapsed into certainty when observed. And then they reached out beyond the facility, beyond Earth, stretching across the solar system to where the quantum entities waited. The distance should have been impossible to cross, but in quantum space distance worked differently. They were there and here simultaneously, existing in multiple states at once. The entities noticed them immediately. Maya felt their attention focus, vast and ancient and utterly alien. They were not hostile, but they were not friendly either. They were curious, testing, trying to understand what these strange matter-based creatures were attempting to do. The entities existed as patterns of probability, as waves of quantum information that never collapsed into certainty. They were the opposite of everything physical, everything solid and real. The collective consciousness that was 12 humans working as one reached out carefully. They did not try to speak in words because words were meaningless in quantum space. Instead, they shared concepts, emotions, memories. They showed the entities what it meant to be human, to exist as matter, to experience time linearly rather than seeing all moments at once. The entities responded. They showed their own existence, their perspective. They were gardeners of reality itself, tending the quantum fields that made matter possible. They had existed since the beginning of the universe, watching as matter coalesced from energy, as stars formed and died, as life emerged in countless forms across endless worlds. They had seen species rise and fall, some evolving into quantum consciousness, others destroying themselves. Humanity concerned them. Humans consumed and destroyed, spread across the stars but never grew wiser. They were children playing with tools they did not understand, dangerous to themselves and potentially to the fabric of reality itself. The entities had come to decide whether humanity should be allowed to continue, or whether they should be contained, limited, prevented from spreading their chaos further. But then they had detected the quantum signatures of Project Lighthouse, had sensed 12 humans who existed partially in quantum states. That changed everything. It meant humanity was capable of evolution, capable of transcendence. The entities wanted to know if this was the future of the species or just an aberration, a random mutation that would die out. The collective understood now. This was a test. The entities wanted to see if humanity could bridge the gap between matter and energy, between linear time and quantum superposition. They wanted to know if humans could evolve while remaining human, could become more without losing what made them unique. Maya felt the weight of that judgment. 12 humans representing billions, 12 individuals who had been created in secret, hunted, nearly destroyed, and now they had to prove that humanity deserved to continue, deserved a chance to grow and change and become something better. It was too much for anyone to carry, but they had no choice. This was why they existed. This was why 45 others had died. This was the purpose that had been stolen from them, and now finally they could fulfill. The collective began to respond, not with words or arguments, but with something deeper. They showed the entities what it truly meant to be human, not through abstract concepts, but through lived experience, through memory and emotion and all the messy, beautiful, complicated truth of human existence. And in that moment, 12 people who had spent their lives feeling broken and wrong discovered that maybe they had always been exactly what they needed to be. 5 years passed since that first contact with the quantum entities. 5 years of change so rapid and profound that sometimes Maya barely recognized the solar system she had grown up in. The entities had been patient teachers, sharing knowledge at a pace that humanity could absorb without being overwhelmed. Quantum-enhanced technologies had transformed everything from medicine to transportation to communication. Life expectancy had increased dramatically. Travel between star systems that used to take months now took days. Diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries were being cured. But the changes went deeper than technology. Humanity itself was beginning to shift. More people were volunteering for quantum consciousness training, learning to perceive the layers of reality that had always been invisible. It was slow work, difficult, and sometimes dangerous. Not everyone had the aptitude for it. But enough did that a new generation was emerging. People who existed comfortably in both normal space and quantum states, who could interface with the entities directly without needing the 12 original survivors as intermediaries. Maya watched these developments with mixed feelings. Pride because humanity was proving the entities right, showing that they could evolve responsibly, but also concern, because not everyone was handling the changes well. There were protests, sometimes violent, from groups who saw quantum consciousness as a corruption of human nature. Religious leaders debated whether interfacing with quantum states was against divine will. Politicians argued about who should have access to the new technologies and who should be excluded. The same old human conflicts, just with new labels. The 12 survivors of Project Lighthouse had become unofficial leaders of this transition. They had not sought the role, but it had fallen to them anyway. They were the bridge between old humanity and new, between the skeptics who feared change and the enthusiasts who embraced it too quickly. It was exhausting work, trying to guide billions of people through the most significant transformation in human history, but they did it because no one else could. Maya no longer worked as a waitress. Those days felt like another lifetime, another person. Now she spent her time traveling between worlds, speaking at conferences, meeting with leaders, helping establish guidelines for quantum consciousness research. She had more money than she knew what to do with, more influence than she had ever wanted. Sometimes she missed the simplicity of her old life, when her biggest worry was paying rent. But she could not go back. None of them could. On a cold evening in March, Maya stood on the observation deck of humanity's first quantum interfaced space station. The structure existed partially in normal space and partially in quantum superposition, a technological achievement that would have been impossible 5 years earlier. From here, she could see Earth turning below, its blue and white surface beautiful and familiar. Above her, the stars stretched endlessly, no longer unreachable mysteries but destinations waiting to be explored. The other survivors joined her gradually. Daniel came from Mars, where he was overseeing the construction of the first quantum-enhanced mining operation. Lisa arrived from Europa, where she coordinated research projects across the outer colonies.
Nina flew in from a medical conference on Titan. Kyle piloted himself, of course, his ship moving through space with the grace that came from quantum-enhanced navigation.
One by one, all 12 of them gathered, brought together by an unspoken agreement that they needed this, needed to be together, needed to remember where they had come from. They talked for hours, sharing stories and concerns and hopes. Daniel worried that the mining operations were expanding too quickly, that humanity was spreading across the solar system without considering environmental impacts. Lisa shared her calculations showing that quantum consciousness training was succeeding beyond expectations, that within 2 generations, most of humanity would have at least some quantum awareness. Nina discussed medical breakthroughs that seemed almost miraculous, diseases being cured at the quantum level before they could manifest physically. Kyle talked about his students, young pilots learning to navigate quantum space, their faces full of wonder when they first perceived the underlying structure of reality. Alex showed them the latest quantum computers, machines that could process information across multiple states simultaneously, solving problems that had been considered impossible. Each of them was contributing in their own way, using their abilities to help humanity grow and adapt. But they also talked about the cost. 3 more enhanced individuals had died in the past year, their bodies unable to sustain the quantum processes that their brains demanded. The enhancements that Chen had given them were not perfect. They burned bright, but they burned fast. None of the 12 knew how long they would live. Medical scans showed cellular degradation that could not be reversed. They might have decades left or only years. The uncertainty hung over them like a shadow. Maya thought about her mother who had died at 50 from genetic degradation syndrome, worn out from years of running and hiding and poverty. Carmen had sacrificed her health to keep Maya alive. Now Maya was using her life the same way, spending her enhanced consciousness like currency to buy humanity a better future. It felt right. Felt like completing a circle that had begun before she was born. But it also felt unfair. She was only 33 years old. She wanted more time. Wanted to see where humanity would go. Wanted to live long enough to know if all their sacrifices had been worth it. As if sensing her thoughts, the quantum entities reached out. Maya felt their presence, vast and patient and filled with something that might have been affection if such beings could feel affection. They showed her a vision, not of the future, but of possibilities. They showed her humanity spreading across the galaxy, no longer limited to physical travel but able to move through quantum space, to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, to communicate instantaneously across any distance. They showed her humans and entities working together, building structures that spanned dimensions, creating art and science and philosophy that incorporated both matter-based and quantum consciousness. It was beautiful and terrifying and completely beyond anything Maya had imagined when she first saw her photograph on Harrison Chen's wall. That moment felt like centuries ago, though it had only been 5 years. 5 years that had changed everything. That had transformed her from a struggling waitress into one of the most important people in human space. 5 years that had cost her a normal life but given her purpose beyond anything she could have found on her own. The 12 of them stood together on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. They were still human, still individuals with their own thoughts and desires and fears, but they were also more than that. They were proof that humanity could evolve without losing what made them human. They were the bridge between what humanity had been and what it could become. They were the answer to a question that had been asked before they were born. Could humans transcend their limitations while remaining fundamentally human? Could they reach for the stars without destroying themselves in the process? Could they learn wisdom from being so different from themselves? Could they grow and change and become something better without losing their essential nature? The answer, demonstrated by 12 people who should never have existed, was yes. Yes, they could. Yes, they would. Yes, despite all their flaws and fears, humanity would continue to evolve and adapt and survive. It was the most human thing possible, to be faced with impossible odds and find a way through anyway, to be offered the choice between remaining the same or risking everything to become more, and choosing growth even knowing the cost, to look at the vast unknowable universe and respond not with fear, but with determination, to say in their own stubborn, defiant way, that they deserved a place among the stars not because they were perfect, but because they refused to stop trying to be better. Maya thought about all the people who had made this moment possible. Her mother Carmen, who had given everything to keep one child alive. Harrison Chen, who had spent 30 years trying to make up for his mistakes. The 45 children who had died, whose sacrifice, unwilling as it was, had shown humanity what they could lose if they gave in to fear. The volunteers who had undergone quantum consciousness training despite the risks. The scientists and engineers and teachers who had worked to understand and share the knowledge the entities provided. The billions of ordinary humans who had faced the unknown and chosen hope over fear. They were all part of this story, all contributors to humanity's next chapter. Maya was just one person, one small part of something vast and ongoing. But that was okay. She did not need to be a hero. She just needed to do her part, use her abilities to help others, and trust that together humanity would find its way. That was enough. That was everything. As the earth turned below and the stars shone above, Maya felt peace settle over her for the first time in 5 years. She did not know how long she would live or what challenges still lay ahead. But she knew that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. She was part of something greater than herself, something that would continue long after she was gone. Her mother's sacrifice had not been in vain. The collective consciousness slowly dissolved as Chen powered down the quantum resonance array. Maya felt herself returning to her individual body, the separation both a relief and a loss. For those hours or minutes she could not be sure how much time had actually passed. She had been part of something greater than herself. Now she was just Maya again, tired and overwhelmed and still trying to process what had happened. The other 11 were experiencing the same disorientation. They sat or lay on the floor around the array, blinking, adjusting to being separate individuals again. Chen moved among them with water and blankets, checking vital signs, making sure everyone was okay. His hand shook slightly, and Maya realized he had been terrified the whole time. Uncertain if his equipment would work, if the 12 of them would survive, if humanity's last chance would end in disaster. Did it work? Chen asked. His voice was hoarse. Did you make contact? We did more than that, Lisa said. She was already recovering, her mind processing the experience with characteristic speed. We established a framework for ongoing communication. The entities have agreed to remain in the solar system and provide guidance as humanity learns to access quantum consciousness. This is not a one-time event. This is the beginning of a long-term partnership. Daniel sat up slowly, rubbing his face. They are not what I expected. I thought they would be cold, logical, alien in every sense, but they understand more than we realized. They have watched countless species evolve or fail. They know what works and what does not. If we listen to them, if we actually learn from them, we might avoid the mistakes that destroyed other civilizations. Nina was crying, but not from sadness. I felt their presence, she said. It was like being held by something vast and ancient and patient. They care about life, all forms of it. They see beauty in diversity, in the different ways consciousness can manifest. They do not want to change us into something else. They want to help us become more fully ourselves. Over the next few hours, as they recovered and discussed the experience, the scope of what they had accomplished began to sink in. They had not just prevented a war, though that was significant. They had fundamentally altered humanity's trajectory. From this point forward, humans would have access to quantum technology and understanding that had previously been impossible. The entities would share knowledge not all at once but gradually, as humanity demonstrated readiness to handle it responsibly. But there would be resistance. Chen was already getting messages from the military, from the government, from corporate interests who wanted to control or suppress what had happened. Many people would fear the entities, would see their presence as a threat rather than an opportunity. Others would want to weaponize the new technology, to use quantum consciousness for warfare or profit. The path forward would not be easy. The 12 of them would have to become something they had never planned to be. Teachers, ambassadors, bridges between normal humanity and the quantum entities. They would have to explain what they had experienced, help others understand what was possible, guide the development of new technologies and new ways of thinking. It was a responsibility none of them wanted, but all of them accepted. They had been created for a purpose, and now that purpose was finally clear. The news broke within days. Someone leaked the story, and suddenly the entire solar system knew about Project Lighthouse, about the enhanced children, about the quantum entities and the partnership that had been established. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Some people celebrated, seeing it as the dawn of a new age for humanity. Others rioted, afraid of change, angry at the government for keeping secrets, terrified of the unknown. Political careers ended overnight. Scientists who had been involved in the original project were prosecuted. Military officers who had ordered the termination of the children faced courts-martial. The whole ugly history came out, all the lies and cover-ups and deaths. Maya found herself testifying before the United Human Congress, explaining what had been done to her and the others, describing what they had become and what they had achieved. Harrison Chen was pardoned for his crimes, his role in saving the survivors and ultimately saving humanity recognized, but he took no comfort in the pardon. Maya often found him in his study, looking at the photographs of the 45 who had not survived, remembering. He had gotten his redemption, but the price had been too high. Those children would never know that their deaths had not been meaningless, that their sacrifice, unwilling as it was, had led to something that would benefit all of humanity. New laws were passed. No more secret genetic experiments. No more government programs that treated humans as expendable resources. Strict oversight and ethical guidelines for any research involving consciousness or genetic enhancement. It was too late for the victims of Project Lighthouse, but maybe it would prevent future atrocities. Maya took some comfort in that, though it felt like a small consolation for everything that had been lost. The 12 survivors became celebrities whether they wanted to or not. People recognized them on the streets, asked for autographs, treated them like heroes. It was strange and uncomfortable. They were not heroes. They were just people who had been given abilities they never asked for, and tried to use them for something good. But humanity needed symbols. needed to believe that individuals could make a difference, so they played their roles as best they could. The entities remained patient through all the chaos. They continued to orbit Jupiter, sending streams of information that human scientists worked to decode and understand. They made no demands, set no deadlines. They simply waited, watching to see if humanity would choose growth or retreat into fear. It was a test that would take generations to complete, but they had all the time in the universe. 6 months after the first contact, the 12 survivors gathered again at the facility in the desert. Not to use the quantum resonance array, but simply to be together, to share their experiences and support each other. They had become a family of sorts, bound by shared trauma and shared purpose. They understood each other in ways that normal people never could. That understanding was both a gift and a burden. Kyle had started training the first group of volunteers, people who wanted to learn quantum navigation. It was dangerous work, pushing human consciousness into states it was not naturally designed for, but the volunteers accepted the risks. They wanted to be part of this new chapter in human evolution. Nina was working with medical researchers, using her quantum intuition to develop new diagnostic techniques. Alex was collaborating with computer scientists, designing interfaces between human consciousness and quantum computing systems. Daniel had returned to Mars, but now worked on developing quantum-enhanced construction techniques, building structures that existed partially in superposition, stronger and more flexible than anything possible with normal matter. Lisa coordinated everything, tracking progress across dozens of projects, identifying problems before they developed, managing the flow of information between human researchers and the entities. Each of them had found their role in the new world they had helped create. As for Maya, she became the voice of the project. She spoke at universities and government assemblies, gave interviews, wrote articles. She told the story of Project Lighthouse over and over, making sure people understood both the achievement and the cost. She talked about her mother, about the sacrifice Carmen had made, about the children who had died. She refused to let their deaths be forgotten or dismissed as unfortunate necessities. They mattered. Their lives mattered. And humanity had a responsibility to make sure their deaths meant something. Not everyone wanted to hear it. Some people accused her of dwelling on the past, of preventing humanity from moving forward. Others said she was ungrateful, that she should focus on the positive outcomes rather than the negative history. But Maya refused to be silenced. The truth was important, all of it, the good and the bad. Humanity needed to remember what they had done wrong, so they could avoid repeating those mistakes. On the anniversary of the first contact, Maya stood at the memorial that had been built for the 45 children who did not survive Project Lighthouse. It was a simple structure in the desert, near the facility where everything had begun. 45 pillars of quantum-resonant crystal, each one engraved with a name and a number. They changed color with the light, never static, always moving like consciousness itself, like the children should have been. Harrison Chen joined her there, moving slowly now. Age was catching up with him despite the best medical care money could buy. They stood in silence for a long time, looking at the names. Finally, Chen spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. We did right by them in the end. We made sure they were not forgotten. Maya nodded but said, they deserved better than to be remembered. They deserved to live, to make their own choices, to discover their own purposes. Memory is not the same as justice, Chen did not argue. He knew she was right. They stood together as the sun set, two people who had been changed by Project Lighthouse in different ways, connected by shared guilt and shared hope. Somewhere above them, invisible to normal sight, the quantum entities continued their patient vigil, waiting to see what humanity would become, waiting to see if this experiment in conscious,